How the other participants? Could you please turn on your camera to talk for a few minutes before we start? Because I know that many other participants are joining. Hello, Miss Minh Hồng Minh, right? Hello, Huyền from Hanoi. I would like to be, today is the last webinar in the series of 4 webinars on success in research, writing, and publishing. So may I hear some? I want to listen to some, reflection from some of you about the 3 first webinars. Miss Huyền from Hanoi, did you attend the first 3 webinars, and what do you feel about the first 3 webinars?
Good afternoon from Hanoi. My greetings to lecturer and to Mr. Linh Chen. Good afternoon, everyone. I attended all 3 webinars previously, and I really appreciate this opportunity to be a participant in this course. I did write a message to the lecturer through TeachTech that the materials were very, valuable to new researchers like us. The resources provided there are very rich in the content and very updated. I spent a lot of time researching and reading the materials and the methodologies and the tools provided there. I wish that I had had more time reading and researching the content, but because of the workload of the first semester of every uni, I think that people are all busy. But I enjoy the content provided there. I wish that the course could be a bit longer and more interactive, but I know that under the time pressure, we couldn't have a discussion because the theory and the content delivered is quite heavy. I appreciate this opportunity a lot. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Actually, research writing is what I think it is a heavy subject. Usually at CML Retrack, we designed a series of 6 webinars during the last 2 years, but for this time we have 2 different webinar series, 4 for university lecturers and 4 for school teachers, and the second series will start next week, also with Thomas Webster. I want to hear the voice from Ho Chi Minh City. Anybody from Ho Chi Minh City, could you please turn on your camera and share? Yeah, may I invite Mr. Nguyễn Tấn Lợi from Ho Chi Minh City? Are you there? Hello, Mr. Lợi. No, Mr. Lợi is not here. How about Miss Trần Kiều Mỹ An in Ho Chi Minh City? Yeah, please turn on your camera to share, to talk a little bit before we start. She's not there. Yes. Yeah, Mỹ An, please.
I cannot turn on my camera right now, but I would like to say something about this.
Yes.
I'm really grateful to attend this webinar because I have learned a lot practical and realistic experience from Thomas, which enrich my knowledge about research writing, and it's also motivate me because I have been inspired by a lot of information that is given by Thomas. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I'm happy to hear some positive feedbacks from all of you. And I think it's time to start now. Once again, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar series on success in research, writing, and publishing, organized by CML Regional Training Center, CML Retrack in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and sponsored by Regional English Language Office, RELO, US Embassy in Hanoi. And the webinars are delivered by Dr. Thomas Webster from Ilha Women's University in Korea. Today, the topic of today's webinar is quite different from the first 3 webinars. The first one is for practitioners. researchers. You write the papers and publish the papers. But today we talk about teaching research methodology. So we changed the role a little bit. And I think that most of us here are working at universities, and sometimes we have to deliver the courses on English language, on teaching research methodology. So Thomas Webster, Dr. Thomas, I think it's time to start the webinar right now. The next 2 hours is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lim. Yeah, as Mr. Lim mentioned, today is a little different. We're gonna change the kind of perspective. That's the best way to talk about it, because we're still on the same topic of research, but we want to look at it from the teacher's perspective. I think you all know the old adage, the old idea that if you want to really learn something, try teaching it. As you teach, you learn more about your own subject. And so I'm hoping that today we can it's actually a good build upon what we talked about before. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. There we go. Yeah, okay. So I hope you can see my screen here. Yeah. Do I have this? Okay, there we go. Yeah, you can see what we're going to do is with today's webinar is we're going to again focus on teaching research. But you can see we're going to have the usual introduction and outro, but I'm going to talk mainly, as I mentioned last time, about PBL, which is problem-based learning. It's a way to teach. It's an approach to teaching that I use whenever I can. And I wish I could have used it from the beginning for all of our 4 webinars, but it's best taught in the classroom. It doesn't lend itself that well to distance learning. And we'll see why, but it's a very useful way to look at it, especially for teaching research in a way that you may not have thought of. Okay, and I want to, I like to give you a real example to make it practical. A number of you have mentioned that you like the practical things that I talk about. So this PBL course is one that I taught, that I do teach now and again. It's called Life in the 21st Century. Okay, and I'm going to show you an example of how this course actually is a problem-based learning course, but it actually is a course really to teach students how to do research, but it makes it real. And again, what's really good about PBL, one of the very useful things about PBL is that you can use it for any setting or any level. And you can adapt it very easily. It's something I'm going to talk about in the second series when I'm talking to the primary and secondary teachers. I'm going to be talking about how to do alternative assessment, especially through a PBL style, through a PBL approach. Okay, and then you can see after I give my example of life in the 21st century, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to have us try to begin how I began that course. I'm going to have us introduce and start doing it so we can get a feeling for what it's like. And we'll see how this goes. Hopefully we'll have some good discussions there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Oops, where am I? Sorry, just a second. I got to drop out just to get this back to where it was. Okay. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay, now I've got it working. And back to the beginning here. There we go. Okay, now we're good. Okay. Let me. Okay. That's a better view. Okay, so what I'd like to think about first is why, again, if we're interested in our own research, why should we be interested necessarily in teaching it? And how can you teach it? If you want to teach it, how would you do it? Well, I've actually taken courses. When I did my PhD, I actually began with an EDD. I started out in an EDD program, a doctorate of education degree rather than a PhD. And when I did that, I had to take courses as part of my degree. And one course I took was on research methods. And that course was very detailed. It had a very good textbook. And if you're interested in that textbook, I can give you a link to it and show it to you later. But that textbook and that teacher were really quite good. But the style of the class was very much a normal, regular kind of approach to teaching research. So what was it? It was basically what we've talked about for the past three webinars. Minus my examples. I've added what I tried to do in all the webinars is to talk about the basic principles and then show you examples of me using those principles in real life. That's been my pattern. When I took the course, it didn't have the real examples. It just had the principles, and that is a pretty typical way to teach. Today, I thought I want to show you a more interesting way to look at it, a more interesting possibility. And again, it's not just to teach research, actually. You can use it in maybe when you're teaching other content. So I think what I'm trying to do with today's webinar is to teach you two things, is to show you two things. One is how you can actually teach research in a different fashion that helps you to learn research more. And second, is to teach you a methodology, problem-based learning, that maybe you can use for teaching not just research, but any other topic, okay? So that's why I'm using this webinar to kind of talk about this topic from this approach. Why do this? Well, this approach, thinking about teaching research especially, is really critical thinking made real. I don't know if you know, but there's been a big push for many years now, a good 10 or 15 years now, to teach students how to think critically. That's a big catchphrase with Pearson education, with the English testing system, ETS, who do all the IBT and TOEIC exams. And of course, with IELTS, I told you I'm an IELTS examiner, and that's something that we focus on with the IELTS exam as well. Critical thinking, teaching students to be critical and to think for themselves carefully. Well, most of the materials about teaching critical thinking is very theoretical and abstract. I've seen actually teachers' content try to teach critical thinking, and it's really boring, and it's really not very practical. You just tell the students, think critically, and you kind of try to help them, but they don't actually, they actually can't really think critically unless they're working on a problem, because you have to have a reason to think, right? That's the key. That's why thinking about research, and especially the problem-based learning style, is really the best way, I think, or one of the best ways to teach critical thinking. And it's not just for researchers, like I said. You can teach this at all levels. You can teach students, even from elementary school, how to do research. Because research, again, is based on science, and science is based on how to think, how to figure things out for yourself. And this is something that we want to teach all students. Again, any level and any topic as well. You can do it with any topic. So maybe even if you're teaching literature or you're teaching the natural sciences, this methodology of teaching students to think for themselves and research for themselves is really valuable for all of these. Okay, so what I'd like to do first is I would like for us to have a chat. I want us to have a little more interaction this webinar than we've had in the past. And so what I would like to think about is our teaching situations, because this is the foundation of where problems are. This is the foundation of where you start to try to figure out, how can I teach research to students? Because it's got to fit into your schedule. Maybe like me, you can't just create a course. you don't have the power to just have a course suddenly to teach research. So how can you fit teaching research into your schedule, and again, in a way that doesn't add work to you, extra time and extra space? It's how do you fit it within your curriculum? Okay, so we need to know about us. So what I'd like to do this webinar is, I'd like to get us into our breakout rooms, like we did in the first webinar, like we tried. I'd like to do that. Okay, so we're going to get into those, and I'd like you to talk in your groups of about 4. Let's see how many we have. 30. Yeah, maybe we could do groups of about 4 students together, or participants together. I'm used to saying students. I teach a lot. But I'd like us to think about these questions. Number 1, what classes do you teach? So in your groups, your breakout rooms, just chat for a moment and say, oh, I teach this, I teach that. How about you? Well, I teach this, I teach that. These are the courses, these are the topics that I teach. Number 2, do you teach any of your class students to do research? So in your classes now, your regular classes, do you need to teach research to them for some purpose, or is that something that you try to do anyway? So again, why or why not? And number 3 is, what do you think are the most important skills that research skills that students should know, they should really have a grasp of? Okay, so I want you to talk about these 3, and then we'll come back and talk about them after. Okay, so let's go ahead and get everybody into the breakout rooms, if we could. The coordinator, please. Let's go ahead and when you get an invitation to join a room, just jump right into your room and start chatting about these 3. This card is on the Teach For, I can show you here. This card is here if you need it separately under the warm-up discussion questions. If you click on that, you can see this screenshot. Okay, so if you have access to our Teach For, Tech for Teach site, then you can just put this up on your screen while you're doing Zoom, or you can of course use my Prezi link. I gave you the link to the Prezi or what you're looking at. Okay. All right, everybody go ahead and go into your breakout rooms, please. And I'll try to.
How many breakout rooms do you want?
About four participants
Yes.
per room. So that would be about 7 or so. Maybe we'll have a few
Yes.
more participants in one room. About 7. Yeah, I'm waiting for everyone to come back into the room. It looks like everybody's been pushed back with me too. I had a good chat with my room. I hope you guys did too. Yeah, let me get back to the screen, to the share screen for a minute. In our group, we talked a little bit about. I talked with one participant who said she that she teaches students kind of in an informal way, kind of to kind of guide them or help them to understand and kind of be able to give their opinions and to be able to ask questions and really to learn more critical thinking, about what they've learned in their materials, their classroom materials. What have they done? And so to be more kind of critical with that and trying to. She said that it was difficult for students to like differentiate, whether the quality of some things is good, it's high, or it's low, or if it's believable, it's not believable. If students go on YouTube and they see videos, how can they learn to, especially with technology, how can they learn to decide if the materials they see, the videos they see are good or bad, or And yeah, so that's what we talked about. Does anyone else want to kind of give an example from their group? Or you can type it in the chat, just give an example of any of, again, maybe how about question number 3, especially, what skills, because that's what we're going to talk about in just a minute. In the participant I spoke with, it seems like the main skill is just critical thinking, like trying to figure out, to decide the value of things, whether it's true or not, and how to think for themselves and have their own perspective. Did you guys have any comments you want to add? You can speak up or you can type it in the chat. I'll wait a moment. Yeah.
I can give an idea about this. I agree that critical thinking is an important skill to teach for students at uni. From my perspective that I had already discussed with my roommates, I think that summarizing information and analyzing information is another important skill that students need to step in the research way. First of all, I think that they need the ability to read fluently, reading comprehension, to do reading comprehension in English, and then summarizing information. Because for many literature parts that I collected and marked for students writing, they just listing only. So the ability to be critical is important, to identify the Venn diagrams, similarity differences, and the common ideas between different articles is important. So I think together with critical thinking, reading comprehension and summarizing, analyzing skills are important too.
Great. Yeah, those are great examples. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Okay, great. Well, we're warmed up now, hopefully. Let's look at what, let's move on and think about what skills, what research skills are common. Everyone kind of agrees that these are the things that students or anyone who's doing research at any level should know. And of course, specifically for research, being able to define your research question is very important. We talked about that again in a previous webinar, so I don't need to talk a lot about it here, but defining your research question involves, as you mentioned, the ability not just to list something, but to actually be able to analyze, to be able to realize what it is exactly you need to know, what you're lacking. So that requires you to understand it and to realize through your own thinking what you need to focus on. Second is being able to outline the project. This means that to be able to understand the scope, how much you need to do and how much or how little you can do, to make it manageable and to understand what needs to be done. This is kind of a management skill. Choosing your research method that matches your question and, of course, the outline that you just realized. Being able to, again, decide if it's going to be quantitative, qualitative, and then what approach you're going to have and what kind of specific techniques you need, like interviews or giving surveys or doing other measures, how you're going to get your data. The next one is specifically, especially with data, is again, as we kind of talked about just now, the other participants said, is deciding if it's reliable, deciding where you go to get your information and how you're going to get it. Finding data is not just finding reliable, but it's also just finding it, because there's, as we talked about in a previous webinar, there are many places you can go if your school pays for the research databases. It's very easy, but if it's not, you need to be able to know where to go. And I gave you guys a number of places. I listed a number of places where you can go and get free research for you to read. And also that's available for students as well. And finally, I think this one is the one that I wanted to emphasize. when I talked about annotated bibliographies before, the ability to take notes, to be able to write down exactly what is important and what you learned, what the takeaway was from looking at any kind of information that you got. And of course, the style of keeping your write-up simple and knowing the sections that you need to, the style and frame that you need to have so that you can have your best chance to get published. All of these are specific research skills that you have to know in order to be successful. Now, what's more interesting, perhaps, is to look deeper underneath all of that. What are the basic skills that could be applicable beyond just research? What's under there? Well, certainly creativity is something that all students and all researchers need to have. You need to be creative. Creative means you have to have kind of an imagination, right? You have to imagine, you have to think about possibilities that are not in front of you. And teaching creativity can be done in so many different ways, but the basis of it, as I heard Carl Sagan once say, is to get your students to feel wonder. You know the word wonder, W-O-N-D-E-R, not wander, W-A-N-D-E-R, but wonder. And wonder in the sense that wonder means that you kind of have a sense when you're looking at something, you are interested because it's amazing to you. Wow, the possibilities, that kind of wonder is a big part of creativity. Judgment, of course, is underneath all of that, all the things that we need to do for research, judging, deciding the value of things. Persistence is one that's not really talked about, but often we talked about that a little bit with Malcolm Gladwell's hours, how many hours of do you need to be a master of some subject? But really, persistence may be the skill that's the most important on this list, because if you just keep trying, really, if you really want something and you keep trying, you will get it. You may not be the best, but you will get it. You will get something if you just keep trying. Of course, if you're organized, you learn to organize. A lot of people say that university, the main purpose of any student going to university is not to be creative, not to learn judgment. It's not really about persistence as much as it's about just organizing yourself. Students need to learn how to be organized in their life. They need to learn how to go to classes on time, how to do the requirements. They need to, bring their books and be responsible. They need to have the things they need. Again, they just need to organize themselves so that they can be more productive in life. And that's what uni teaches them. Communicating better with your peers and with your teachers, with everyone, is necessary. And so these 5 are the underpinning skills that really, when you're teaching or thinking about research, all of these are there. And when you're thinking about teaching, all of these are there. They share these 5 basic underpinning skills. And so how can we teach those 5 basic skills the best? Again, creativity, judgment, persistence, organization, communication. How can we teach those to our students best? Well, I have an argument for that. I have an answer, and it's PBL. It's problem-based. Why problem-based? Well, before I hit the video, if we zoom in for just a second to see what PBL really is, if you haven't been experienced with PBL, you haven't seen it, it's often sometimes called project-based, which is very similar but different. Project-based learning, PBL, is often project-based. Project-based is a bigger category. Project-based means something, there are many different ways to do a project. One of those ways is what I'm talking about now. Problem-based learning is a kind of project-based learning. So it's a more focused way of doing a project, okay? And it's based upon an issue. And you can see that what's good about it is that it's hands-on, And it requires the student to investigate, right? The student has to figure it out. Can you see where some of those skills we just talked about would come in handy, where you would learn these things necessarily? If you're investigating and you've got your hands on some real problem, then you have to be, using those skills. What I'd like to do is just introduce this with a short video that's quite good, showing you how on a university level, how problem-based learning is used in a class. And again, this is just one example of one topic. Let's look at it. Good.
In problem-based learning, students start discussing a problem in the group. So rather than studying theories or telling you about theories, you start from an actual problem.
So we have this 8-year-old boy who was floating in the water for 50 minutes. And he was found by a passing by person who actually then did some resuscitation.
In this session, the group starts deliberating about a small kid falling in the water.
The case is a bit ambiguous. It doesn't really say that the boy was floating head down. So possibly he was floating on his back.
They think they don't have any relevant knowledge, but in discussing they notice they know a lot. Students remember stuff they've seen on TV or from personal experience.
I think I've seen on the Discovery Channel a couple of weeks ago that people get locked in.
And they start amplifying each other, brainstorming and coming up with ideas, valuable ideas.
We could focus on the metabolism.
At the end of the session, they summarize what they come up with. So we came up with some good ideas and see what they don't understand and take that as a starting point of learning for the next 2 days.
What I really like is that the tutor really helps you through every step in your process. He asks you the right questions when you're stuck or when you don't know things.
I find it awesome to work in small groups just because, you have this level of interaction that you cannot reach in a big audience.
We get to know each other really quickly during the course, so it's easy for us to combine our multicultural backgrounds and organize extracurricular activities.
For me, it's great to work in an international environment because for me it's not only about learning the academic subject, but also kind of seeing how people approach it differently depending on where they come from. It's really interesting to hear about other cultures and other mentalities.
The process is giving them energy to start studying the problem with each other. It kickstarts their learning.
Okay. Yeah. So what you heard them talk about, one of the key things he said is it gives them energy. It gives the students energy to start and to do what they're, to get going with their learning. Another important part you notice is that he said they have a chat, they talk together, and they discuss and they find out that they know more, they have more knowledge than they thought. Their own experience and ideas are actually useful, and then once they talk, that's their starting point to decide what they need to learn. So problem-based learning, one of the best parts about it is that it has a motivation because it's individual. The people in the small groups can give input about what is important. So that's really good. Just to let you know the basic characteristics of problem-based learning, it's open-ended. If you really do problem-based learning, you want people to talk about their ideas. You don't want them to find answers. You're really trying to get them to think more than to find solutions. You're trying to get them involved in the process of thinking. Problems and cases are context specific. So again, this is very important. You can't just give them a problem that they will be interested in. You have to, for the best problem-based, you have to talk with them and find out what fits. What is the real problems that they need, that they have? Students are working themselves. This is a hard one for teachers. and for students who are not used to it. The students need to be told not how to do things, but what to do. You need to guide them, like I heard one participant talk to me earlier about. You really need to be a guide and let the small groups direct themselves and to trust them to make mistakes and to get past their mistakes. Again, a key is that the problem is identified and then the group is able to talk together and negotiate what they think is the best solution. Now, it doesn't mean it's the right solution. And later, the teacher and the whole class together can talk about it. Again, you have the small groups do their own solution. And then when they talk together as a class, then they may learn different solutions that they hadn't thought of. Each group may have a different solution. But again, the key is that they can get the members to agree. They can communicate and negotiate with each other and agree upon where they share ideas. And then they are open and willing enough to present. And even if it's not right, they can still say why they got that solution. And finally, again, the teachers have to be facilitators. They have to be guides. They cannot be lecturers. You cannot stand in the front of the class with a problem-based learning style. You can't do what I'm doing right now. You can't just be the talker and let everybody listen. It's really, you're just kind of like the organizer. And when you see any issues or problems, you're like a manager at a restaurant where you open the doors, you make sure the lights are turned on, you make sure all the tables are set, you make sure that the food and the cooks are doing what they need to do. You're making sure that the customers are ready to come in and that the parking is okay. And you're walking around looking at all the parts and making sure it's all working. That's really what the job of a PBL teacher is. It's not really giving information. You're not the source of information. You're just the kind of organizer and guide who can help, especially, again, whenever students have questions. Then yes, you're giving information, then you're giving help, but only when it's started from them. Okay? Yeah, I see a raised hand. Go ahead. Was that a question?
Yeah, I have a question related to the effectiveness of PPL.
Okay.
Because as you know that you are drawing a really perfect, good communication, good facilitator. But actually, I'm thinking about the roles of facilitator here, because as you know that when I guide a student, it's really easy for the guide to lead the thinking of the student. You know?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's also a problem because if your students are not really good at critical thinking, they really easily, after their discussion, they really easily accept your sharing. They accept your thinking, and they follow your guide. And it's I just because my instructor really how to say she's really she tried to arguing with me. Yeah, because it's if the facilitator just say that it's everyone discuss, and then you raise a big problem and everyone follow exactly what you are saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. And that I think that the instructors often are not, they're not really very good at listening. in my experience too, when I've been a teacher and I've heard, or when I've been a student listening to other teachers, I have a similar experience to yours, to where the teacher really has a kind of purpose and they have a solution and they have an idea that they don't want to go anywhere. They just want to keep that same, they let students talk, but then they move on. And there are many other kinds of problems that teachers can have. To try to be really facilitators can be quite hard for many teachers. And again, you can't, you said it's kind of ideal I'm talking about, and I agree. That's why I want to show you my real example, to show you how I actually did it in reality. So hopefully that will give you more perspective about it. Someone else asked, how do we teach how to, what was the question was, again, how to teach to improve our judgment skills. And that, yeah, I'll be talking about that in a minute, how you can teach students to improve their judgment. Okay, so yeah, these are good concerns. Let's move on a little bit so that I can get to exactly those. Again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to move on here for a minute, and then I'll come back and show you examples of what you were talking about, hopefully to answer that and to give you information about how teachers can be more open and what to do in that situation. But PBL has benefits like improving problem-solving ability, again, critical thinking, creative skills. Again, the main thing about it is it increases motivation. It really creates real problems. It's based on real problems. And students are able, the key is that students are able to transfer their learning to new situations. That's the one. That's why I got into PBL. Because, if you teach students to learn the materials and then you give a test and they get a score, and then the next time they leave the classroom and they don't have anything they can use except that knowledge exactly, maybe if they remember. But PBL has, I'm going to talk about it in the drawbacks here of PBL, but it has the benefit of being able to, whatever that process of learning how to think, how to think about a problem, that process, once they learn it and get better at it, then they can use that for any situation and any topic. So it's transferable. It's a really useful tool that they can use for anything that they look at. Now, the first drawback is that often students can't get going themselves because they don't know how to do it. They don't know what's important. They don't know what they should focus on because they're kids, or because they're young, or because they're inexperienced, or because they're maybe not, they're not used to directing their own learning. And so that can be a problem. Second, of course, is that in the style, students are struggling. They're trying to figure out, again, it's not a perfect situation, that trying to get the teacher to help them if the teacher doesn't know how to do PBL, and the teacher and the interaction with students, and the students are talking, and it takes longer to get through material. But again, if you think back to the benefit, it really helps that whatever the students learn, they keep that learning, not just for an exam, but to pass the class and into their lives, they keep it. So it's real learning that stays with them, but it's less. It's not covering a big, large amount of materials, especially, again, when students are not used to it or when the teacher's not used to it. So it's something you've got to learn and get better at. Finally, it really can be a lot of work for the teacher. It can be, especially when you first start. Because again, you've got to learn how to do it, and it's not natural. If you're used to just teaching and letting students do their thing and then you're done, if you're used to that style, then it can be very challenging to especially for planning, because you have to kind of start with nothing at the beginning of the class. You have to start with nothing but an idea about how you're going to continue, how you're going to proceed. You just have a method, but you don't have material, right? You have a structure, but you don't have the guts, the body. And that can be very, uncomfortable for teachers because it's dangerous. And so you can't always use PBL if you're in a situation where that won't work. Okay. I put this on here because I wanted you to be able to look at this and see, this is a really good, very short look at PBL. And it's talking about, again, it starts out with a kind of explanation about what PBL is. It tells you about the background, and it also tells you about something called concept maps, about, again, how you can get students thinking. And this is part of how to get students to judge, to make judgments, is how they put things down on a piece of paper. This is like brainstorming, right? We talked about in a previous webinar, but this is explains it very, very, step by step, how teachers can, what they should look at and think about. It's very useful, and it's not that long. You can see that it has all these steps until it finally kind of gives you, again, demonstrating how problem-based learning and concept maps work. And these are the two basic things that you need to know if you want to think about using PBL, again, especially if you're using it to teach how to do research. If you have the mind that you're trying to get students to learn these research skills, using PBL can really help you to do it. But again, it really, I can tell you, it really works, but it has to be learned, and it has to be learned a lot by the teacher, especially because you're not used to it. Now, let me give you my real life example. I'm looking at the screen to see, can we have that article to read? Yes, I'll put that one up separately for you. I put some materials in for you. I'm going to show you. Let me just point to the materials that I did put up here. If you look at the web page, in the materials discussed for today, I put a number of things here for you about PBL and about using, again, just a lot of different simple information to help you if you're interested in using PBL and how to do it. These are not very giant long articles. They're pretty practical the way that they're approaching. Okay, and the one that I just showed you is probably the most practical, and I'll put that up there. I didn't put that up because I thought maybe it's so short you can just look at it, but I'll put it up there for you. But let me show you again. I'm going to talk now about my class that I created with the idea of using PBL. It's called Life in the 21st Century, and I wanted to give you this. Especially, I wanted to give you, let me stop sharing for a second. I wanted to upload this file, but it was too big. The PDF was too big. This is what I give to my students. Do I have it here? Yeah, I have it highlighted here. Let me share this with you. I don't know if I can somehow share this with you. I want to give it to you. Maybe I can give it to you. I can put it on Dropbox later, and then you guys can have access to it. You can grab it off of Dropbox or Google Drive. I'll ask you about that, which one is a better method for you. But let me share the screen real quick, and I'll show it to you. There. Boom. Can you see it here in the center? It's the Life in the 21st Century Handbook. This is what I give to students. This is what this is what I went through and designed. When I designed the course, I ended up just creating a package out of it to help instruct the students, because a big part of PBL is teaching them how to do it because it's new. Okay, this was from 2015 when I first started doing it. You can see I put a table of contents, but you can see all of this information. I told them about the aims and the goals and literacies. I told them about how to ask questions. This is information about how to think about problems. You can see, starting with making an analogy, finding facts, considering feelings, making judgments, and making suggestions. So I point to this during class. Sometimes I'd say, oh, go look at that, at the hand diagram, the 5 points, the 5 finger questions. Go look at those. I might tell a student, go look at that. Or I might go tell them, oh, go look at the habits of mind, because you need to think about like number 4. You need to think about thinking more flexibly. You know, after I walk around in the classroom, I see students who have particular problems, and then I point them here and say, oh, go look at this, you know, go think of it. And this information, I don't just teach them this at all. I use this as a guide. Only when I see a problem with a student they're having, I'll point to it and say, oh, go look at that. Go think about multiple intelligences, because that's what you're talking about. Or again, when students are having fights in groups, sometimes they argue. This is kind of like the teacher saying what they wanted and they didn't want to listen to what the students had to say. But I'll tell them here, let's go talk about how to resolve this conflict. Let's go look at how to resolve this disagreement that you guys are having. Let's go back and look at these steps. And then I have in here information about how to search, how to Google. Again, this is information that I found on the internet that I've been using in different classes for different reasons. You can see here how to use Google Book Search or Google Scholar. This is very useful too. How to evaluate websites. So it tells you how to do it. And then I like this very much because it gives you examples. Here's an example first of a website that is credible. It's a good one. And it has all of these points saying why it's a good site. And then here's one that is, again, still credible. Here, as we go on, here's one that may be credible. It's not as credible. So this is like a medium level one. It's got examples of it. And then I think I have a final one here, one that is not credible. And this is showing students, look, this website has problems and here's why. Go look at the problems with the citations and the links and the author. And by the way, in this class, I'm not teaching them research. That's not what they're here to learn. But you know what? I'm teaching them research. They don't know I'm teaching them research, but this is research, right? How to do citations, how to think about authors and publishing, and it's all research, but it's only taught to them when they have problems trying to do what they're doing, right? So this research, teaching them research is not really just teaching them how to do research, it's teaching them how to think and how to do things that are the same as research. This is real research for any level, even if you're not a researcher. This is for students that are just solving problems. Again, examples of not credible websites. Here's some other ones that are less credible. Finally, on the bottom here, here's some criteria for evaluating. And again, logical analysis. When I hear students making logical problems, you know, they're not thinking clearly, I point them to some of these things about these different kinds of like innate egocentrism. If the level's very high, I can talk about those things. If they're not, then I don't send them to this book. Again, it depends on the student level, how much I say about inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. But I also talk about fallacies, and I like to give them a full sheet. You can go on the internet and find this. And finally, look, I made this example table about the most common kind of thinking style, this logic called Toulmin. This is used for debating, like showing students how to make an argument with reasons and evidence. This is research, right? This is what you do when you're doing your research. Like you might have a claim, an argument like most cats are smarter than most dogs. And then you might have reasons. You might have 3 reasons that you think that's true. And then you might have evidence to prove each one of those reasons. So I point students to this to help them to make better judgments, to say, wait a minute, you're not thinking clearly. Your evidence is not supporting your warrant, or your warrant is not a good warrant for your argument. So I teach students how to think better, how to make judgments, again, because this is the basis of not just debating or understanding something, but it's the basis of how you do research. It really is. And again, I tell students here about why problem-based learning is helpful, even though it's difficult. And I make jokes. A lot of these are very funny jokes that teach them about thinking and about how to make better judgment through comic strips. So I put that at the end just for fun. Okay. So let me go back and share my other screen now. That example, again, I want to somehow try to give you that PDF so you guys can have that as a resource, or I'll arrange that somehow to give that to you, because it's very useful, and it took me a long time to put all those materials together, but I want to share those with you. I want you guys to be able to have those, and maybe you can use part of it. Okay. So again, that's what I give students for this course, but let me talk about this course now. Let me just run through it briefly. I see the time is running, so I'm just going to talk briefly here and go right through the whole course and just show you how I did it. Here's where I started. I started thinking about what research skills do most teachers, like regular teachers, think that students need. And so I thought, okay, I see a list of all the things that students need to learn. So that's the first thing. With problem-based learning, you need to think about what skills do the students need, not materials, not what articles or what materials or readings. You don't think that way with problem-based. You think what skills do they need? So I began with that. And again, you can see these skills under here about developing a research question, how to look at online resources, how to develop their ability to to make judgments and to paraphrase. All the critical thinking stuff is what I wanted them to learn. So I said, okay, that's kind of like this that I heard this before. There's 3 steps here, 3 stories. Look at the first floor. The first floor is that they have to kind of investigate. They have to go look for stuff. They have to have an idea and go kind of get the stuff, get the information. Then they need to think about it and decide what value it has. They need to think, they need to reason, they need to make judgments. So they need to learn that. And of course, they need to be able to have that judgment to use it for other things. They have to gain this knowledge and be able to hold on to it. So these are my goals. This is when I began with my design of my class. I said, I want students to be able to do this. That's what I'm trying to teach them. Okay. So I decided that in my integrated style, what I was going to do is focus on life in the 21st century. And I wanted them to learn, again, this was my syllabus. And there's a description. I tell them that this is a problem-based learning course. Again, you got to tell the students because it's a strange method. It's unusual. And the students are not used to it. So you have to kind of explain and show them videos about how it works and why it's good. Okay? But there's no textbook, no materials. I just begin with my approach. You can see that there's group study as the main basis of the learning. There's group presentations. There's exams. There's response papers, there's attendance. So this is a pretty normal looking syllabus, isn't it? I mean, it's got the basics of a normal kind of class, but it's very different. And I'll show you how it's very different. Look at the schedule, just to give you an idea. After I introduced it in the first couple weeks, I am telling them about problem-based learning, and I'm just telling them about how we begin with problems instead of me just teaching them something. And then you can see here, the first thing I did was give them a guided problem where I showed them a problem I was interested in, which is smartphones again. The smartphone dilemma, I called it, and I presented it to them and I showed them all the steps and I ran through the entire thing. I modeled it for them so that they would be more comfortable with the process. And then from that point on, I had them begin with trying to figure out what their problems are. What do they want to talk about this semester? What problems would they like to, what content This is very dangerous or difficult for teachers, but I didn't have any content. I asked them what is the content that they want to discuss. So we did that and we came up with a list I'm going to show you in a minute. And then, so problem number 2 was groups selected. The group selected from our list what they wanted to do. Each group did a different problem. Then we did problem 3. And you can see that at the end of each problem, they give presentations to the class about their problem. And I'll show you how they did that with examples in a second. But then after, at the midterm, well, we had problem 3 and presentations. And then after problem 3, we had a content exam on the materials. So they had to actually take an exam, and they created the exam questions, not me. I had them to do it. I'll show it to you. And then the second half is the same style. The 4th problem, the 5th problem, the 6th problem. But look at the 6th problem. The 6th problem was the overall class problem. What is the, you know, given all these issues, these problems that the students identified, how do we live our life then? How do we put it all together? How does it relate to our real lives now? How can we use it? So I let students figure out, put all the problems together, and what solution do they come to from that? And that is the answer for them about what life in the 21st century means for them. And again, a final content exam as well to finish. Okay, so it's a pretty standard syllabus, but it's quite different. Here's the problems that they came up with. There's the one I began with, this one only. This was my only content, my example, smartphone dilemma. The students came up with these: 21st century pirates, test taking, chalk talk, edutainment, selfies and surgeries. Look at these interesting topics: CCTV tracking, Photoshop. What about yellow dust in Korea? That's a big problem. This kind of hwangsa, as we call it. 21st century yangbans. These are kind of like the royal class of Koreans that are kind of rich people who have power in Korea, versus the dirt spoon. If you watched Parasite, the famous movie Parasite that was from South Korea, it was talking about this topic. Should you stay single or get married? That was another topic that they liked. Very interesting. Look at here's the rest of the list. Again, the last question I reserved, living in the 21st century, was that kind of what perspectives do you get from all the lessons above? So I did that one too. But again, they decided what content. But look at the others: conflicts and intervention, rules and freedom in Korea, and Korean university enrollment, because enrollment is going down at all the universities and money is changing. You know, there's less people in Korea. So that's a problem. There's less babies being born. So they wanted to look at that. And so after they did that, after they gave this topic, I had them brainstorm exactly what the problem is. And I had them have a perspective. So look at this one, for example. Look at rules versus freedom. In problem-based learning, you need a specific problem from a specific perspective. Look at the description. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, is looking into reports of lawlessness in South Korea and other countries in order to decide on its pervasiveness and effects. Your group will provide basic insights from a citizen perspective. Do you see how specific it is? This is, in other words, this problem that they're working on is for the OECD. They are working for the OECD. They are an information collector for the OECD, and they're trying to give insights about law and order in Korea. That's their goal. Look at the other one here. If we just jump over here to another one, they had 3 different possible ones here. How about selfies and surgeries? They had 2 possibilities. Look at this first one. South Korea is the world's plastic surgery capital. Your group must report on the cause and effects of this issue to the board of directors of the International Council of Women's Health in order to inform them of the issue from female students in South Korea. So in this problem, if they chose this one and they chose this specific approach, they are working for the board of directors for the International Council of Women's Health. So they have to give information that is useful for that group in order to decide about what the effects of plastic surgery are on women's health. Do you see how useful and practical this is? And do you see in this course, by the way, I had students come back to me after they took this course. One of them began working for the UN. She actually got a job in the UN, and she came back and said, I'm doing exactly this now. This is exactly what I'm doing. Thank you. But at the time, she was very upset because it was too much work. It was too difficult. It was too strange. But she was challenged and very happy, but she didn't realize the value until she actually got a job doing exactly this kind of. So these were very interesting questions. And again, students decided which problem they wanted to do, the groups together. So in group study, I'm going to go through this really. I wish I had more time to give you specifics, but I'm going to just bounce through and show you. You can look at it for yourself later. You can look at this Prezi, go to the link that I gave you, and you can look at it. It's up forever. But you can see in the group study and the presentations and exams what they had to do. For group study, I had a rubric for them where I looked at, look at the role, the team, this role of this student was team leader. I had these roles change for every problem. So Sunny was the team leader here, but she had a different role for other problems. Leadership, manner, efficiency. And again, I showed them exactly where they, where they lost points for her role as a leader. Was she creative? Was her manner good? Again, I'm walking around talking to her, but guess what? I evaluated students using this rubric, but the students in the group also evaluated each other using this. That's another part of PBL. Have the students evaluate each other. I took all the students, the other members of the group, they gave me their grade for that student, for Sunny, and I put it together with mine 50-50. I averaged all the students' grades and then put mine in there and averaged it. And then that was their grade for that project, for that first problem, second, third, fourth problem, right? So Sunny was the leader, and later she had a different role. Here is Bona. She was the scribe. She had to do all the writing and create handouts for the other members of the class. She had to put everything in writing. And you can see what she got for her score. Here's another role, the researcher. This was the person who had to go actually search for information and had to be credible and find, and you can see she had to be able to synthesize. She had to be able to find scope and depth. She had to find credible sources. So students were asking me questions. When they were the researcher, I'd go over and help them, the researcher, with how to be more credible. And I'd show them in the handbook how to search for good websites. So you see, that's what they would do with this role. The final role was presenter, because after they finished, the presenter would go up and give their results to the whole class. And remember the perspective of the problem. The class is that group. So when that group talked about the problem with plastic surgery, right? The group that chose that topic was talking to the women's, the Council for Women's Health. The class was the audience was the Council for Women's Health. So they had to present like they are up there talking to them, not to a class of students, but they're talking to that organization. And so Kat here, you can see she did a pretty good job. She did a pretty good job. You can see her preparation was her weakness. Okay, that was the group study. It's graded by me and by the students, both equally. Presentations, again, that student, Kat, here's what I did for her. I gave her this feedback. For each person's role, for each problem, I gave her feedback. I looked at her presentation manner, her Again, her matter, her manner, her method. How were they? And again, these are short presentations, only 10 minutes. These are short problems. We have 6 problems in the class. They were pretty short. And again, I evaluated the students for their presentation, and the other students in their group graded their presentation as well. So even this role of presentation was done by students and the teacher. And look, I also, of course, give comments about things that were good, general comments, and then I try to give, if I need to, I also give feedback about things that could have been better. But she was pretty good overall. I talked about the good things that she did and why it was graded the way it was. Okay? Exams. After the materials that these students present to each other in class, you know, again, they decided the problem, they decided what they were going to do, then they created their questions. So each group created their group's questions, and they had multiple choice questions. You can see about CCTV, group 2, problem number 1, group 2, problem number 2, group 2, problem number 3. Again, group 4, I mixed this up for different, like they had a lot of multiple choice questions that were good. And I let them decide which questions they thought were good. And of course, they get their own questions right, but every group gets their questions right. So they have a score on the test. They get 1/3 of the exam right because it's their materials. But they also, again, need to understand from the other presentations and the other handouts. And look, they did true false questions, and I showed which group and which problem, and short answer questions as well. Again, they wrote all of these and they agreed which one was a good. And I encourage them to do this kind of question where you say list 4 of the 6. Don't remember everything perfectly, but you should remember at least 4 of those 6. You should be able to remember 3 of the 5. That's another thing where you let students not have to be perfect memorizers, but they can remember most of the material. Okay, now response papers, they gave short little 1-2 page response papers for each problem. You know, they picked one of the other groups to respond to their issue and they wrote about it. And then they picked their 2 best for grading. So here's an example of that. Here is the information I give them about how to do the response paper. And you can see it's really short, only 1 page. It's just a quick response. Like, what do you think about that presentation? What do you think about that group's materials? In other words, if you were the organization of women's health, do you think that that group was effective? Did they do their job well? Why or why not? And again, I wanted them to include references, just quick references to show why what they're telling that group has value or not. So here's what they did. Here's an example from a student who was from Nigeria, and she had picked the topic of marriage, whether to get married, and she did it from the perspective, the local perspective of Nigeria. And her group members had to learn a lot about Nigerian marriages. And you can see that she has a strong opinion about it. And look at the way she wrote it: change of mindset, unfaithfulness, desperation. So social effects of divorce. She's giving a response about this, the way forward. This is what she thinks. This is her conclusion. And she gave her 3 citations, and I gave her feedback here on the bottom, just real quick feedback, just saying why I thought it was quite good. And again, giving her how she could have improved it. And I gave her a grade right there out of 5 for this paper. This is what their score sheet looked like when I was done. Looks pretty complicated, doesn't it? It's actually not so difficult. It's just, this is the way you do it. You can create your own style. For each student, I had them for a problem and I gave them grades. And again, what I had to do, remember, I'm having students grade each other. So I had to input the other students. Can you see the other students have to give their scores, and I put them together to do averages to figure out what their score is between me and the other students grading them. That's all that is. And so on the final one, you can see here's their midterm exam score. Their group studies score comes again from the total from me and them evaluating themselves and the presentation. The papers also are done. The papers are done by me. I evaluated those. And of course, attendance. Ooh, she didn't have good attendance, right? 2 out of 10, not very good. It was 0. You can see some students in this class had troubles with the course. And I adjusted the course after this for the second time I taught it. But that's how you can do a problem-based class. That's how I did it. I created a complete class. I had the freedom to make a new class. But you can use these kinds of examples, these kinds of, again, oops, I need to click through this and show you, but you can create your own, parts or pieces. You can grab an aspect or a part of that approach of PBL. You don't have to do the whole lesson. For example, you can begin with problems, trying to get students to talk about problems, and then use that as the basis to design your course content. And then you can design the entire course and have a normal course from then. So in other words, you can do fact finding at the beginning about your content, and then you can just design your entire course content once you know more, after you get kind of a needs analysis, as we call it, from the students. You can learn more about your audience before you design your materials. And this is kind of what, if you didn't realize, this is kind of what I did in the first webinar. I kind of got a feeling. I had my materials in mind, but I didn't have them perfectly organized yet because I wanted to see what you guys needed. And I realized you guys needed practical examples. So in all of my webinars, I put all of those these real examples in there to show you what it's really like, because I got the sense that that's what you were interested in. So I used a PBL kind of approach, even though I didn't teach with PBL at all. I didn't give the seminar with PBL, but I did use it from the beginning to inform me about what the problems are that you're interested in, as best I could. Okay. So I see I have a question over here, or a comment. Let's see. The list of problems are presented by the students, or the teacher will give out the problems and add the questions. Yeah, maybe I answered that already. In the chat there, the problems were created by the students, except problem number 1 about smartphones that I used as an example, a model. And the last one, where I had students kind of think about all the problems we talked about and put them all together to think about life in the 21st century. So the students did 4 of the 6 themselves. They created the entire list, the pool of problems, and I helped them to design the problems exactly detailed, with a perspective and with a specific problem that they could research and learn more about. So yeah, that was how we did that. That's a good question. Okay, we have some time to do this. I'd like to let us just begin this a little bit. What if you were going to start a PBL course, or what if you were, again, if you were able to do what I just said? What if you're able to, you've taught your courses enough times. By the way, I've done this also, not just creating a whole new course with PBL, but actually taking one of a course that I've taught many times and changing it, in finding where I could make it more PBL-like. So what I began with was thinking, well, let's think about the content, because I know the skills I'm teaching to students that I want them to learn. I know the things that, for example, maybe in the courses that you have, there are certain skills or certain things that you have to teach to students. Well, the first thing that you need to be able to do is to pull out, if you can. You can't always do this, but if you can pull out the important things from the content, right? So some of the teachers that I've helped with this at my school, they have to really think more carefully about how to do that, because it doesn't seem possible for them, they think often. Like, the content is important, that's why I teach it. But if you kind of step above from a teacher's perspective, again, when you're looking back like I did here in the introduction, when we're thinking about these skills here, creativity, judgment, persistence, organization, communication, and even if you're thinking about other specific things that you need students to, like, they need to learn how to write papers better. They need to be able to write an essay, for example. Even that would be a really good example is teaching writing, because you have things that they need to learn. They need to learn how to write a topic sentence. They need to learn how to write a thesis, or they need to learn how to write an academic style structure. Whatever, those things can be pulled away from the content, right? You don't have to have the content. You can have that idea that you need to have them learn how to write academically. And then if you begin with those ideas, then think about the content, let the students give you the content. Don't begin with the content yourself. Don't decide what project, what research, or what writing topics they're going to have. For example, this is what I did in one of my classes. I let them tell me. At the beginning, we brainstormed about what they're thinking, what's important for them right now. And I let them talk about it at the beginning, and then I grabbed what I could. Some things I couldn't grab because I didn't think it was a reasonable topic, because it didn't fit the goals of teaching academic writing. But I chose from their topics. They gave me the pool for my content, and I was able to choose that those are the best things that they like, they are motivated with, and then I'm able to still teach the things I need to teach. So again, this is how you can begin to have a PBL course. Okay, so again, problem-based learning, it begins with the blue problem on the top, and then you have the students and yourself together think about problems or things that are issues, things that need to be resolved, things that are important and difficult. And then you think of ideas about that. Well, what do I know about it? What do we already know about it? What are we missing? In other words, we need something else to solve it. We need more, but what do we need? And that requires you sometimes to go get the knowledge from the internet or from your books or from, whatever you need to figure out things that you don't know. And again, as a teacher, you're applying those into from a learning perspective. What are, guide these students to take that knowledge and to be able to use it, to be able to keep that approach of taking the knowledge and applying it to new situations. So again, you as a teacher, you're thinking about how can I get the students to keep this in their mind and to know it well so that they can use it for other settings and again, to solve the problem that we're talking about now. Okay, so they're learning two things. They're learning problems, answers to problems, or they're thinking about answers to problems that are real to them, but they're also getting those learning points that you want to get in there to them. So you have to, again, make sure that you're incorporating that. Okay, so here's what I'd like us to discuss. This is, again, you can see this one on our homepage. Here you can look at it. I'm going to try to let's just do it together. Maybe I don't need to show you, but it's here if you wanted to see that. I put it again here as the PBL questions that you could look at, but I think we don't really have time. So let's just talk about this together using the chat, okay? So I'd like for you guys can chime in and answer any of these three questions. Again, this was in case we had time, but I don't think we have time. So let's just focus on these three questions. Make a list of 5 issues is what I wanted, but let's just think of issues that are important to you. Again, don't think about teaching, but think about things that maybe it is teaching, maybe an issue for you in your teaching. Whatever the issue is, what is something that you're thinking about that is important to you in your life? It could be anything in your personal life or teaching. What it was an issue, just anything. For me, for example, if I just think of one, I have a lot of different things that I'm thinking about. One of them right now for me is thinking about how I'm going to organize my next my next seminar with the primary and secondary. So I'm wondering right now what's important to those teachers. What am I going to need to focus on? That's what is an issue I'm thinking about. In my personal life, I'm thinking about, oh, how can I teach my photo class students? How can I use my office time better? So issues like that. Okay, number two, again, what's your opinion of that issue? Number three, what do you think, what information would you need if you think about your opinion about that issue, and it's an issue that you can't resolve very easily. So you're thinking, well, here's my opinion of it, but I can't figure it out. Well, what do you think you might need? You know, what's missing? What knowledge or what skills do you think you're missing that would help you to be able to solve the problem? And where could you get it? You know, could you go to the internet? Which website, what kind of website might have it? Or which books or which magazines, or where can you get that information? Who can you talk to? So this is what I had students do in my PBL class there, the one I just gave an example of. I had them begin thinking like this about their issues. This is how we got our set of issues. Okay, someone has chimed in, so I'm looking. Good, go ahead and add your ideas here in the chat. The first one, tuition, future job, yeah. How to complete school, finish the school assignments, time management, got a part-time job. Yeah, going out with friends, how you manage your time. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one.
Can I share a story that happened earlier in my class?
Please.
And I think that this is pretty much like for problem-based learning. I could see a lot of similarities, but I think that my situation, my case is a little bit, how to say, the guided one, not a freer one. I was assigned to teach like an academic writing class, and one of the tasks there is the aim of the course was to help students to learn how to write an academic report. Usually, the sequence of the lectures could be like the introduction of the report, a comparison and contrast between reports and essays, and then the template of a report, language for reports, and then tools to analyze data, then come the assignment. But no, I changed a little bit upside down. So usually we will release the assignment notification in middle of the course, like a week 5 or week 7 in 15 weeks, and then students, they won't have time to write their assignments according to the template provided. But this time I changed a little bit, that I started with the introduction lecture about the topics that they are interested in, and I grouped them into the similar interests, and then I let them, how to say, choose their own topics, and they start with their topic there. And then when I go with the theories of the course, they themselves will ask themselves that what tools or what things they need to complete their reports with the topic that they are very interested in. And I found something really interesting, that previously in other courses, students, they were very reluctant, indifferent to learning how to write, to prepare their citations and references correctly. But this time, they know that they need something to do it correctly in case they don't want their minus points. So they search and they suggest EndNote as a tool to make the reference and citations themselves. So they master the skills. They know that they need to have EndNote to avoid a minus point in the reports, and they learn themselves through YouTube videos, and then they can reteach their other groups how to do it, And another group, they understood that they need to analyze the data, but they didn't know how to. So previously I had to give lectures on that, but then they found the book in the library teaching how to analyze data with examples provided there. So they share with the class. So I think that problem-based learning is something that we change the role of the teacher. Although the teacher has to work a lot more to work with different topics, and it's a bit tiring and overloaded. But I think that students, they become more active in the way they need to prepare for the final product, because that is something that they choose and they need to present.
Yeah.
So I appreciate a lot what you have shared today. It is exactly what I need more theory to dig into. Thank you very much for your lecture today.
Sure. Wow, that's a great example. I think you very much are using a problem-based learning style. And so, yeah. I also noticed that something that I think in terms of being able to actually do this, yourself, if you've taught a course many times, that's really when you can try PBL out. That's the easiest way to start, is because you already know how to teach the course. You've done it enough times. So you can kind of, you can risk a little bit. Like you were saying, it's a little bit kind of dangerous to kind of let the students decide the different things, right? But the thing is, and it's also dangerous because you think, oh, I as a teacher, I have to teach them these things. My responsibility is I have to cover these things, right? I have to cover these. And so you feel a responsible teacher, I have to make sure that I cover them. But what you find in PBL, like you were just saying, if you listened, when I listened to what you said, I was actually picking out all the things that those students needed to learn that I would have, at the beginning, like you said, you think I need to teach these to students, and then they start, they just kind of learn it from me, and then they might see the examples. But what happened there in your example is that they actually learned the same stuff, but they didn't get it presented to them like, here, you need to learn this. It was, hey, I need this. It was them reaching to you and saying, teacher, please give me this thing that I need. And you were able to say, from your experience and your knowledge, you're able to take that and to say, look, here's the best way to use it. And so you're really, I think, teaching, that's what teaching really should be about. It's about giving what students really need. And let me give you one example that's a specific example. Try to be practical. If you're teaching something, the most boring thing you can teach, and every teacher, when it comes to teaching research, right? What's the most boring thing to teach? That's some teachers say, I don't need to teach that. It's easy. They can do it. Referencing, right? Think about it. Have you ever had to teach students how to write a citation, or how to write a reference, or how to write a bibliography? It's so boring, isn't it? Because you're just saying, okay, well, you put you list the author's name, then you list the date, then you list the title, then you use the page number. It's so boring. But a PBL approach that I use every time, and it's not for PBL classes at all, but this is how I teach now. This is how I tried it, and this is how I teach referencing. I actually, in the classroom, I give students magazines. I check them out from the library if I can, or I bring my own. I have magazines, I have, professional journals. I find a newspaper story. I grab one off the internet and print it. I give them all, or I have them go look on the internet. If they have their own, now they have their own laptops, they can just search, and I tell them where to go. But I give them real stuff, and then I give them the form. And they have to, in groups, they have to say, okay, how do we make a citation for this magazine? Here it is in front of us. And then they have to kind of look and go, wait, I don't see the date, teacher. Where is the date? Where's the copyright? Where's the, and so they have to physically flip through the magazine and find where this stuff is. And then they have to go to the newspaper. They have to look on the actual website and find that specific one. And I can tell you that students, when I taught referencing before, they got very sleepy. They were like, oh, yes, teacher, you're telling us more information, teacher. Yes, teacher. But once I just brought the materials in and handed them to them, and I said, make a reference for those. I didn't, by the way, I did not teach them at all. Not one thing. I did not teach them anything. I just said, we need to be able to do referencing. And here are the different styles. Here are handouts about it. But here, this group, do the, here's the magazine. Okay, here's the newspaper. Make a reference for that. Do an APA style. And the other one, do an MLA style. And I just have them do it. And I can tell you the classes, and then by the way, I go by and grab the magazine and give it to the other group and grab the newspaper and give it to them. They all get all the sources. And I can tell you, you would think I was teaching something like TikTok videos in the class if you looked at it from outside, because the students are all active and they're like, "Whoa, where is it? I can't find the date. Where?" It was suddenly the class changed. It was interactive. It was interesting. And I didn't do a different thing. I didn't do anything different. In fact, I still walked around. They asked me, teacher, help. And that's where I'm teaching them. Each student, when they said, teacher, help, that's when I'm teaching them. And sometimes I have to teach the same thing to more than one student, but it's a little different if I listen carefully. Each student's, their problem might be a little different than the one that just talked to me. And so I'm customizing it, even though for a teacher, again, I have to say the same thing more than once sometimes, it's still better. Overall, I'm really doing real teaching, and they're grabbing me. Teacher, come help me. It's not me like this, like on this presentation here, sorry, this webinar where I'm just talking, and you're just taking. They are actually reaching up and grabbing. And so, yeah, it's much better. I think we're getting near here. I see a comment asking that you're saying you're really interested in training courses on how to analyze and interpret data effectively in writing a scientific paper. Yes. Okay. So if I was going to take, I've done this with a PBL style, how could you do that? Training courses on how to analyze and interpret data. Okay. You can go on YouTube. I'm not sure how you're asking this question. Do you want to go see a training course on how to do this? Then you can go to YouTube. YouTube is such an amazing source, like you said, like Dong Hyun, you said, that was very, very good example of how students use YouTube. Use YouTube, it's very good. We use that in life for everything, how to learn how to change a light bulb. If you don't, how to fix your computer, you use YouTube. Go do it. There's lots. You can just search. I can give you some links to that if you want specifically. I can go find some, but you can do it just as well as me. Again, you're learn to do that better by experience. I recommend you just put in the words you did there. Training course, analyze, interpret data effectively. Put those in the search and boom, you're going to get probably some good results. But if I was teaching this to students, again, a training course on how to analyze and interpret data, then I would give them data. And because I'm an experienced researcher, I have data. I've got it, and I've got databases that I can grab chunks like real stuff, and I just hand it to them, and I say, analyze this. And then they scratch their heads and go, and then they start to work with it and they figure it out. And then again, whenever I do any teaching, I give them handouts for everything. And when I have to do teaching, it's when they ask me, they say, come help me with this specific thing. I understand all the other stuff. You don't have to tell me, right? What is this one thing I don't understand? Come help me with this one thing. And so my teaching is more effective. Again, again, interpreting data effectively in writing a paper. I talked about that in a previous webinar a little bit as well. So yeah. Does anyone else have any other comments or anything? Here's another one. Can you share the link for Life in the 21st Century? The link. Oh, you mean the for the book, for the supplement, I'm guessing, the thing I showed you that was too big. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll put what I'll try to do is put it in Dropbox or Google Drive. Can you guys tell me real quick in the message, do you like Google Drive better or Dropbox better? Which one is easier for you guys to access? Just write Drive or Drop.
Thomas, I think you can post on Google Drive and then you post the link on the Tech4Teach platform, as will be there and people can download.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I can put it where?
You can post it on Google Drive and then post the link on the Tech4Teach platform.
Okay.
Because I expect every document to be shared in the Tech4Teach platform. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Lim. And it looks like everybody agrees with you too. Everybody's saying Google Drive. So that's the way. I'll put it on Google Drive for you as a shared document with the link, and you guys can get it. I see that someone says, do I recommend any course guide to this method? Yes, those links, I already put the information here. Here's the basic information about those. These are guides right here. Again, if you go look through those, if you go look through those, you can find information about using this style. Okay. So yeah, I think we're about done now. Again, if you have any general questions, this is our last webinar. So I'm very interested, of course, if you could give feedback about things, what did you like? We've already kind of done that with Mr. Lim asking you before, but number 2 and 3 are very helpful to me, for me in the future. What could have been improved? What would you want me to do more of? What do you wish I had focused on more? Because that could be very helpful to me. So if you want to leave those replies on the webpage, that would be helpful to me too. But yeah, if you guys have any general comments now or anything, that you'd like to say, or Mr. Lim, you can take it away, either one.
Yes, any general comments or reflection from you before we close the webinar?
Any reflection?
Yes.
Yeah, my reflection is that I'm sorry that I did all the talking mostly. I didn't know how, on Zoom, you never know how it's going to work. But yeah. I imagined that we would have a chance to have everybody talk a lot. Like right now, just talking, like some participants did talk today, and I was very happy. But in the first webinar, we had some technical problems. And so I kind of thought that we have to use chat. But again, this is a problem with Zoom. I wish we could do this in person so that technology is not a problem. But I still thought it was quite good. I still got some good feedback from you guys, and I was quite happy with your participation and interest. It's very, again, you guys are the ones, right? You guys.
Yeah, but that is a feature of the webinars. The presenters usually talk much more than the participants. That's why the webinar should be limited in 2 hours. Usually we design the webinars in 2 hours only. More than that, it will be very tiring. So after 4 webinars, I think that the participants who joined the webinar feel very happy, as you can read on the comments in the chat box. Thank you very much for the positive comments and feedbacks from all of you. Today is the last webinar of the series on success in research, writing, and publishing. But because this is a hybrid, we use the the blended mode for this webinar. So you still have some activities to do on the Tech4Teach platform. For example, you can download the documents. You can respond to the questions raised by Dr. Thomas Webster. I think that's the way we can interact. You can share reflections and comments and ideas about the webinars. And also in the next few days, Ms. Hoàng Lan will send you an evaluation form. We, CML Retract, really wants to get feedbacks from you to improve our events and professional development activities in the future. And for Thomas, this is not the end, because next week we will start another series for school teachers. So we will have more opportunities to work with you. On behalf of CML Retract, I would like to say thanks to all of you for your participation, for your active participation and learning with CML Retract and with Relo. I hope to welcome you back to future events, either as face-to-face events or online events with CML Retract. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. When I see you.